In August 1996, a father went to check on his daughter and discovered a horrifying scene in Fresno, California. After more than 2 decades, a measure of justice was brought. Deborah Sarah Debbie Dorian was born in 1974 in Fresno. Debbie's life took a more structured path as she pursued higher education. She enrolled at California State University, Fresno, where she dedicated herself to studying economics. Living alone in her own apartment while attending college, Debbie exhibited a maturity beyond her years. In August 1996, Debbie was preparing for a father-daughter trip, excited for the adventures they planned to share. Her anticipation and careful preparations reflected her close bond with her father, who had always been a central figure in her life. But tragically, Debbie never arrived at the meeting point, raising immediate concern for her safety. Worried by her absence, Debbie's father decided to check on her. He went to her apartment only to find the door unlocked. Stepping inside, he was confronted with a horrifying scene. Debbie's body lay on the floor. Overcome with shock and fear, he immediately contacted the authorities to report the discovery. The police quickly arrived at the apartment to begin their investigation. Upon examining the scene, they found that Debbie had been bound tightly with duct tape at her ankles, feet, and wrists. Her head, eyes, nose, and mouth were also restrained with tape, leaving no doubt that she had been forcibly restrained. The authorities determined that her demise was caused by asphyxiation. Further examination revealed additional horrors. Signs of indecent assault were present, confirming that Debbie had been victimized before her tragic end. Initially, the investigators arrested a suspect whose DNA appeared to match the evidence found at the scene. However, subsequent testing proved that this individual was not responsible for ending Debbie's life, leaving the case unresolved. For years, the investigation remained at a standstill. Law enforcement attempted to run the suspect's DNA through databases, but the trail went cold. Between 1999 and 2002, the detectives began noticing a pattern of indecent assaults in Visalia, California, which bore striking similarities to Debbie's case. In 2002, forensic testing confirmed that DNA from Debbie's case matched DNA from one of these assaults, though the perpetrator's identity remained unknown. Several years later, the investigators filed a Jane Doe complaint against the unidentified DNA profile connected to Debbie's case. The filing accused the unknown perpetrator of being involved in multiple assaults across the region from the late 1990s through the early 2000s. Despite this step, the identity behind the DNA remained a mystery, and the case lingered unresolved for decades. More than 20 years after Debbie's life was ended, a major breakthrough finally emerged. In 2018, advancements in genetic genealogy allowed the investigators to revisit the evidence with new tools. This technology opened a door that had long been closed, offering renewed hope that the person responsible for Debbie's crime could finally be identified. The following year, the detectives linked the DNA profile to a man named Nicky Dwayne Stain through evidence obtained from an unrelated assault case. The authorities determined that Stain was not only responsible for the assault and ending the life of 22-year-old Debbie in 1996, but also connected to at least 5 additional assaults in Visalia. With mounting evidence, he was taken into custody in late 2019. After his arrest, the prosecutors formally charged Stain with ending Debbie's life and several other assault-related offenses. As the case moved forward, it became clear that the evidence against him was substantial. In an effort to avoid a trial and the possibility of capital punishment, Stain made a surprising decision years later. On May 15, 2025, he pleaded guilty to 12 felony counts, including Debbie's case and multiple assaults committed between 1999 and 2002. During the hearing, one survivor testified about her experience, stating she was only 19 years old when the perpetrator assaulted her while she was walking home from her job at a Visalia ice cream parlor. She spoke about the lasting psychological toll, describing the pain and memories that continued to haunt her years later. Before sentencing, Debbie's mother addressed the court, sharing the devastation her family endured. She spoke of once believing that hard work, love, and kindness could shield a person from evil, only to learn how close and unexpected it can be. Finally, on June 12, 2025, Stain was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, bringing a long-awaited conclusion to a case that had haunted the investigators and Debbie's family for decades. Debbie's mother, Sarah Lovin, said, "She was a precious person. She was sweet and loving and smart and a wonderful young lady." On Thanksgiving 2010, 3 brothers went missing, and a search began across Michigan and Ohio. The case left a lasting scar on the community, as law enforcement struggled to uncover the truth behind the disappearance for years. Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton were born in the early to mid-2000s and spent their childhood in Lenawee County, Michigan. Their parents were John Skelton and Tanya Zuvers, who initially raised the boys together as a family. Over time, however, the relationship between the parents deteriorated, setting the stage for significant changes in the boys' lives. The couple eventually went through a contentious divorce. As the separation progressed, disputes over custody became a central and deeply divisive issue between the parents. Following the divorce, the boys primarily lived with their mother, Tanya, while their father, John, was granted scheduled visitation. This arrangement placed the brothers between 2 households, navigating a new and unstable family dynamic at a very young age. In 2010, the 3 brothers were close in age, with Andrew being the oldest at 9 years old, Alexander 7, and Tanner just 5. The Skelton brothers spent Thanksgiving with their father, John Skelton, as outlined in a court-ordered custody arrangement. The holiday visit was meant to be temporary, with plans for the boys to return home later that same evening. Under the agreement, John was expected to bring Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner back to their mother that night. However, as the hours passed, he failed to return the children and did not arrive at the designated time. When questioned, John did not provide a clear or reasonable explanation for the delay. His lack of communication and failure to follow the custody order immediately raised concern. As the boys remained unaccounted for and no valid reason was given for their absence, Tanya reported the situation to the law enforcement authorities. The uncertainty surrounding the children's whereabouts prompted immediate alarm. The police began an investigation to determine where they were, focusing first on the last known contact. John was questioned, as he was the final person confirmed to have been with the boys. During interviews, John claimed that the children were safe, but his statements shifted repeatedly. He offered inconsistent and contradictory accounts regarding their location, deepening concern and suspicion. Because the boys were missing and had not been returned under a custody order, the authorities officially launched a missing children investigation. The day after the Skelton brothers disappeared, the police arrested John Skelton. The arrest came after he failed to return the children and continued to provide conflicting explanations about their whereabouts. During the investigation, the authorities tracked Skelton's phone to Ohio early on November 26th. When the police searched his home, they found it in disarray, along with a noose and a Bible containing a circled verse, raising serious concern about his intentions. At one point, Skelton told the police that he was 95% certain the boys were in a dumpster in Holiday City, Ohio. On another occasion, he claimed they were wrapped in blankets and left in an old schoolhouse in Kunkel, Ohio. The investigators, however, found nothing at the locations Skelton identified. Weeks later, it was testified that searches of both areas turned up no trace of the children. Despite these leads, the boys remained missing. The authorities conducted extensive searches across Michigan and Ohio, scouring woods, bodies of water, and other potential hiding places. Tips poured in from across the country, but none led to the recovery of Andrew, Alexander, or Tanner. In September 2011, John Skelton pleaded no contest to 3 counts of unlawful imprisonment and was sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison. He was denied parole in 2020 and 2022. He was reviewed for parole, and the board found him to still be a risk to the community. He was scheduled for release on November 29, 2025, after serving his full sentence. On March 5, 2025, a judge declared Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton legally deceased. Their mother, Tanya, has filed a petition in Lenawee County Probate Court requesting it. She shared the following in a family statement on social media. "This decision came after much thought and discussion with my family and friends. It did not come lightly and was definitely a difficult decision to make. No parent wants to lose a child, but to have the court step in and declare them deceased is just unfathomable. At the end of the day, one person is responsible for the disappearance of my sons. That person, at one point, claimed the boys would hibernate until they graduate. As of today, June 14th, 2024, all 3 boys are over 18 and all would have graduated high school, yet they have not been returned to me and are still missing." Skelton said that he gave the boys away to an underground group, the Amish, to protect them from their mother. He alleged that Tanya had abused the boys. She denies that allegation. Tanya was charged with 4th-degree criminal misconduct in the late 1990s for having intercourse with a 14-year-old boy. She said, "That has all been investigated. My stuff was gone through. My children come first. Always have. Always will. My dream job was to be a mom, and it is the greatest job in the world. But to say that I abused my sons, that ends me." The ruling cited the absence of evidence indicating their survival and acknowledged the profound emotional toll their disappearance had taken on both the family and the wider community. A local Amish lady said that the Amish communities stay in touch with each other, and if the boys turned up, everyone would know. In her statement, the judge commented on the enduring impact of the case, saying, "This is a case of terrible and long-standing impact on the community of Lenawee. No condolences will ever be enough for such loss suffered." Despite the gravity of the situation, she declined to formally rule that their father had ended the lives of the boys, noting that there was insufficient evidence to make such a legal determination. Just weeks before Skelton's scheduled release, the Michigan State Police announced the filing of 3 open slaying charges, along with 3 counts of tampering with evidence. These charges were intended to keep him in custody while the investigation continued. Skelton remains detained at the Lenawee County Jail, held on a $60 million bond. The authorities have stated that the case is actively moving forward, reflecting the ongoing efforts to achieve justice for the missing brothers. In response to the new charges against Skelton, the family issued a statement saying the latest development has left us shocked and heartbroken all over again. They said, "It has been 15 long years since our 3 boys, Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, went missing. Throughout this time, our family has lived with unimaginable pain, unanswered questions, and the constant hope that one day we might learn the truth about what happened to them. Our priority has always been, and continues to be, finding out what happened to Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, and seeking justice for them. We ask that the investigation be allowed to proceed thoroughly and without interference so that the truth may finally come to light." The statement continued. "We also ask for privacy and respect during this incredibly difficult time as we process these devastating developments and await further information from law enforcement." Skelton's preliminary examination is scheduled for May 2026, a crucial step that will determine whether the charges will proceed to a full trial. In January 1997, a woman left her Spokane, Washington home, never to return. It was not until decades later that forensic genetic genealogy offered a breakthrough. Margaret Anselmo was born in 1951 in Spokane. Those who knew her described her as a devoted mother who cared deeply for her family, particularly her 2 children, who were the center of her world. Margaret's professional life reflected her creativity and artistic talent. She worked as a floral designer, a role that allowed her to express her eye for detail and beauty. On January 3, 1997, Margaret left her home to run an errand, unaware that her life was about to be violently ended. It was a day that began like any other, with ordinary plans and routines, but would soon become a grim chapter in Spokane's history. Later that afternoon, a delivery driver made a chilling discovery. Margaret's body was found face down beneath an abandoned semi-truck trailer in a snowy alley at 714 East Pacific Avenue on the edge of downtown Spokane. The police were quickly alerted and arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. The medical examiner determined that blunt force trauma to the head was the cause of her demise. Further examination revealed that Margaret had also been indecently assaulted, confirming the brutality of the crime. Early evidence collected at the scene failed to provide any leads. The investigators searched for clues in the alley and surrounding areas, but nothing pointed to a suspect. Despite the violent nature of the attack, Margaret's money was found untouched in her purse, suggesting that robbery was not the motive behind the crime. The authorities collected DNA evidence from the crime scene, hoping that modern forensic methods might eventually identify the perpetrator. However, the sample produced no match in the national DNA database, leaving the investigators with frustratingly few options. With no suspect and no immediate resolution, the case quickly went cold. After 2.5 decades, in 2022, the Spokane Police Department, working alongside the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, took a significant step toward solving Margaret's cold case. Physical evidence from the 1997 scene was sent to Othram. Using advanced techniques, Othram scientists sequenced DNA from the evidence to create a genome-based profile, then searched genetic genealogy databases to identify potential relatives of the suspect. The detectives followed up on the leads provided by the genealogy search, contacting family members who might be connected to the perpetrator. Laboratory testing confirmed that one of these relatives was the child of the suspect, while another was a half-sibling. In November 2025, through this analysis, the authorities were able to identify the only individual who fit this family pattern: Brian James Anderson. Anderson was a resident of Pend Oreille County, Washington, who later fathered 2 children and worked at a local hardware store. The investigators determined that he ended his own life in 2009, leaving questions about the case unresolved. At the time when Margaret's life was ended, the authorities estimated that Anderson was about 20 years old, while Margaret was 45. The Spokane Police Department stated that if Anderson were alive today, he would face charges of first-degree assault and first-degree slaying. Despite the identification of the suspect, the investigators have not been able to determine a clear motive for the attack. The circumstances surrounding Margaret's tragic end remain partially unresolved, though the identification of her perpetrator provides some closure. Lisa Anselmo, Margaret's daughter, said, "She was a beautiful, loving mom." In September 2004, a woman was discovered deceased in her Lake City, South Carolina apartment. The investigators immediately launched a probe into her case, but with few leads and no clear suspect, the case went cold for over a decade. Lindsey Shawn Simmons was born in 1984 in Lake City. As she entered adulthood, Lindsey began living independently in Lake City. She worked hard to support herself and her child. On September 5, 2004, tragedy struck Lindsey's life. Just 6 days before she was set to celebrate her 20th birthday, her body was discovered in her apartment. She had been stabbed multiple times and was found partially covered with a carpet, a shocking scene that immediately drew the attention of law enforcement. The police quickly launched an investigation to determine what had occurred and to identify the perpetrator responsible for this brutal crime. The officers combed through the apartment for evidence, interviewing anyone who may have had contact with Lindsey in the days leading up to her demise. Every detail was examined in an effort to uncover the truth. Her apartment, once a place of safety and routine, held the grim scene of her untimely end. The intensity of the crime left her family and community reeling with shock and grief. Despite the police's efforts, the investigation faced significant challenges. Leads were scarce, and there were few clues pointing to the identity of the perpetrator. Witnesses were unable to provide substantial information, and no immediate motive could be determined, leaving law enforcement with little to guide their next steps. With no clear suspect or evidence to pursue, the case eventually went cold. After a decade went by, in 2014, the Lake City Police Department made the decision to reopen Lindsey's cold case. After a decade of unresolved questions surrounding her tragic crime, the investigators hoped that new methods and renewed attention could uncover critical leads. The decision marked a turning point in the effort to bring justice to Lindsey and her family. Police officials, including the Lake City police chief, began considering the possibility that Lindsey's perpetrator may not have acted alone. Evidence collected at the scene suggested that there could have been two perpetrators involved. Physical clues and details from the apartment indicated coordination, prompting the investigators to expand their focus beyond a single suspect. The authorities also suggested that Lindsey may have been familiar with the people responsible for ending her life. Her circle of acquaintances, as well as those connected to her child's father, were reviewed closely. The police carefully examined relationships and interactions that might explain a motive. Over the years, the department had preserved photographs and physical evidence from the original investigation. These items were kept intact, ensuring that modern forensic techniques could be applied if necessary. This careful storage allowed the investigators to revisit the case with tools and knowledge unavailable in 2004. During the reopened investigation, more than 60 individuals were interviewed about Lindsey's demise over the prior 10 years. Several were polygraphed and subjected to DNA testing, while others offered accounts that differed from earlier statements. Some people refused to cooperate, adding layers of complexity to the case. Each testimony, whether consistent or conflicting, contributed to the broader understanding of the events surrounding her crime. The investigators were eventually able to connect the crime to a slaying-for-hire scenario. It emerged that Lindsey and the father of her child had been engaged in a custody dispute, a conflict that may have motivated others to intervene violently. This development suggested that her demise was not random, but instead linked to personal conflicts, deepening the seriousness and premeditated nature of the case. The investigators relied on new witness statements, advances in investigative techniques, and a thorough re-examination of old evidence to identify potential suspects in Lindsey's case. These efforts were part of a renewed focus to resolve a case that had remained cold for over 2 decades, demonstrating the persistence of law enforcement in seeking justice. On December 18, 2024, 3 individuals were arrested in connection with Lindsey's crime. 56-year-old Kim Burgess, 49-year-old Tanya Burgess, and 60-year-old Mac Hanna. The Lake City Police Department, with assistance from the FBI and U.S. Marshals, announced the arrests, marking a major breakthrough in a case that had long frustrated authorities and devastated Lindsey's family. The prosecutors allege that Mac Hanna orchestrated a slaying-for-hire plot, enlisting the Burgess sisters to carry out the fatal crime in order to gain full custody of his infant child. The accusation points to a calculated and premeditated plan, highlighting the seriousness of the charges and the personal conflicts behind the crime. Initially, Mac Hanna was denied bond, remaining in custody as the investigation continued. However, on December 18, 2025, he was granted bond after spending over a year detained. His attorney argued that he had no involvement in the case, and the court allowed his release pending trial, a significant development in the ongoing legal proceedings. Kim Burgess faces additional charges connected to a 1992 incident involving the end of a newborn. The prosecutors allege that the child was alive at birth but later concealed and found deceased under a bed. While this charge is not directly related to Lindsey's case, it reflects the broader scope of the investigation and the seriousness of the allegations against the individuals involved. The Lake City Police Department emphasized that the investigation into Lindsey's case is far from over, with ongoing efforts to secure convictions and bring closure to her family. Lindsey's loved ones have expressed gratitude for the progress that has been made, hopeful that justice for her tragic demise will ultimately be achieved. Lindsey's family hoped and prayed for a breakthrough in the case. Her mother passed away following an illness. Her father, David Simmons, said, "Over the past 2 decades, he has shed many tears while praying for justice to come one day." Lindsey's family said they are just thankful. Chief Miles and his team of officers reopened the investigation that led to the arrests and charges after 20 years. They said that they applaud Miles's dedication to bringing justice for their loved one. Lindsey's son, that was 1-year-old and is now 21 years old, was at the bond hearing but did not say anything.